For anyone who's joining us for the first time, we just a bit of housekeeping at the start. We want to hear your questions and your comments. Please do get them in the chat, your tasting notes, your kind of feedback. We want this to be as interactive as possible. And we're also launching a golden dram. Some of you might have got an email about it today. I haven't checked my inbox on that side, but you can win a bottle of Deanston 40-year-old by purchasing some of the regular Deanston products on our website, and that will include your purchases of any bottle you purchase with the 15% discount at the end of this. So it's a really really cool prize and opportunity to win something really unique. So yeah, when I give the 15% discount code out at the end, get on there and get those bottles into the cart, and you never know, you could be doubly lucky. But that's enough for me anyway. Brendan, do you want to tell everyone who you are? It's always fantastic to have someone like yourself on who's a master distiller and is so hands-on involved and isn't just a brand rep. Not that that's anything wrong with that, but you know what I mean.
Oh, they're terrible, aren't they? Like scum of the earth. Yeah. So hi everyone. My name's Brendan McCarran, officially the master distiller for Distillery International. So Distillery International is a group of distilleries. So Tobermory, which makes Tobermory and Leitchig, Bunnahabhain on the Isle of Islay, which makes incredible unpeated sherried whiskies, and then also the one I'm in my kitchen right now, the distillery that's only 10 minutes from my home, the Distillery of Tonight, which is the amazing waxy single malt of Deanston. So I look after all three distilleries. I also look after our blended scotches. So I make Black Bottle and some Scottish Leader. I make some gin as well. But my job title, master distiller. So I think a lot of people think I'm the distillery manager at Deanston maybe, or at Bunnahabhain or Leitchig day by day. But effectively, I've been in the industry for, it's coming up 20 years, which feels horrible to me, but everyone that sees this face thinks, God, that's not as long as we expected. You look about 70. But I've been in the industry for coming up 20 years, and I've been a distiller, I've been a maltster, I've been a blender, I've been a whiskey maker, I've been a master blender. So now I am in charge from raw materials coming in. So I buy all the barley and all the casks for the distillery, for the company. I run all three distilleries, so I'm in charge of the distillate that's produced. But I also look after our maturation and our strategy for our stocks. And I get to make the whiskey at the end as well. And then the cherry on top, every so often I get to sit down and talk about the whiskies as well. So it's a pretty busy job, but it's the best job on earth. And some people say that, but I think they're lying. I know they're lying, actually. They just say it because they think that's what you should say. But I genuinely do have the best job on earth.
Marvelous. Well, that's fantastic to hear. I'm just outside Gargunnock, so about 4 miles from the distillery. So we take the dog out walking in Doon along the River Teeth, which I'm sure you'll tell us all about tonight.
Yeah, so sometimes like lunchtime or maybe later at night, if I'm doing a shift, I'll walk, and there is a few fellas hanging about that say they're out walking a dog along that canal in Doon.
Well, I'm normally there with my partner, so not.
They say that too. They say that too.
Marvelous. Well, James in the chat has a great question about how you became a master distiller. But I thought maybe before we came into that, we might actually go through the lineup as we're going to taste them tonight. And I don't know, maybe we could get I presume we're going to start with the 12. We might get that poured. I'm parched.
Well, do you know what? I'm going to do it a wee bit differently because I'm just crazy that way. If that's okay, let's just see. If anyone's pre-poured, we can do it that way. But what I would suggest,
no one has been told any lineup up till now. So if they only know what's in the box, so if they've pre-poured, it's on them.
So sometimes
sometimes
in whiskey it makes sense to go. You go with this one, and you go a little bit older and a little bit this and this and this and this. But let's start with the 18-year-old. Let's start with Deanston 18, and there's a couple of reasons. So I'll try to find the camera. I'm on a laptop, so it's always hard to find the camera. Yeah. But let's start with Deanston 18, and I want to start with Deanston 18 for a couple of reasons. Well, number one, it is the reigning whiskey of the year in one of the big competitions, which it won. So nice to start with a whiskey of the year. It's always a way to win over a crowd when you're useless at doing whiskey tastings. Give them the good stuff early, but also it's one of the more delicate Deanstons. So I'd like you to try it before you know, your palate isn't going to be short, don't worry, after 5 whiskies. But this is probably one of the ones that's a little bit more esoteric, you know, and has a little bit more of there's the initial upfront flavours, but you might just find little top notes, little hints of suggestions of different things that possibly you wouldn't find if you were 4th or 5th whiskey in. So that's why we're starting with Deanston 18. Also, it's a whiskey that was going to be delisted until I joined, and I reversed that decision. I made a new batch, and it won Whiskey of the Year. So it's just a great way to make me sound brilliant. And Johnny and Luke on the call will know that that's probably my primary skill, is making myself sound good. And they just wish my second skill was actually being good, but that'll come later. So, I tell you what, just everyone, just drink away. But we're going to talk a lot about Deanston. You're going to hear the word waxy a lot tonight. So if anyone wants to do, you know, a little keeping score, or if anyone's a bouncer, you know, in a nightclub and wants to keep the clicker going, there's going to be a lot of mentions of the word waxy, because that's the spirit that we have.
You're not talking about the pub in Glasgow, no? Waxy O'Connor's, no?
So Waxy's is great. You know, Waxy's is great. It's a brilliant pub. I've spent many a night scooping a few pints in there before getting the train back after uni, for example. And it is, I don't know if anyone's Glasgow or from nearby, but it is like a bit of a maze of a pub. And I'm always surprised I've never seen David Bowie wandering down the stairs upside down in a very tight leotard, like in the end of Labyrinth in that place. But I've never...
Well, I'd be very worried if you did now, but yeah.
Well, you never know. Just maybe one pint too many if I do. But yeah, waxy spirit from Deanston is the name of the game, and you're going to try and pick up this waxiness in every whiskey you taste tonight. So 18-year-old you're having right now, it's 18 years in bourbon casks. So we were really looking for quite active bourbon casks as well. You know, we do like refills and we like second fills, but the 18-year-old is quite a lot of first fill bourbon in there. And the other thing that it has in there is it has a good bit of age as well. So 18 years old means the minimum whiskey is 18, but there's a bit of 19 and 20 and 21 in there as well. But don't think I could be an absolute shyster and try and, you know, drive a big sale and say, you know, 90% of the whiskey in there is 21 years old. That's just not true. But we do add layers of age. And what we're trying to get is you're trying to get this amazing waxy texture. So waxy isn't just texture, it is in the aroma, it is in the taste as well. But I'm a big texture person when it comes to food, when it comes to drink. Like, texture is something that kind of drives the way that I enjoy or not like food and drink. But you're looking for apples, pears, peaches. I get peaches, and it's not only it tastes like peach, but it's almost like the sensation of biting into a peach when you try the 18-year-old. It's also got a brilliant bit of, like, you know, it's such a catch-all term, but there's this term like baking spices, but it just saves you having to list 17 different spices in the spice rack. But, you know, it has that kind of flavour, almost like a pastry's getting made, or tarte tatin or something like that. A little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of clove, a little bit of white pepper in there. And it does just have that, almost like thick honey, you know, so it tastes of honey. Lots of whiskies, all whiskies you could argue, taste of honey, but this is almost like, you know, the honey is taking forever to drizzle out, or whatever that fancy little spoon's called that drizzles out honey. I can't remember the name of it. Well, I never knew, actually. We just called it a spoon in Coatbridge, where I'm from. So, but it's like thick honey. Everything's kind of a little bit slower moving, a little bit more intense, a little bit more oily in the Deanston 18. And I love it. Most people's favourite Deanston, my favourite's actually one of the others we're going to drink tonight, but most people's favourite Deanston, and I think it really stands up to, you did a blind tasting of 18-year-old single malts, which really is one of those sweet spots for whiskey that it stands itself. It comes out a lot. Well, it did by, you know, winning a blind tasting for Whiskey of the Year. So beautiful waxy spirit from Deanston, and a nice way to start the evening. All of our whiskies tonight, the ABV is on the label, but all of them are a minimum of 46.3. And what the reason we do that is it gives a lot of texture, it makes the flavour work brilliantly, but it also means we do not chill filter our whiskies. So there's no chill filtration in Deanston, and everything is all natural colour. And by all natural colour, because there's a bit of scepticism that that's like a loophole, all natural means we do not use spirit caramel. This is the colour of the whiskey when it comes out of the cask. So don't be surprised when you see a colour change from the first bottle of 18 you buy to the second, or the first 12 to the second. It's because we refuse to add spirit caramel to our whiskies.
Oh, that's fantastic. We got some great comments in there coming in. Steph says apples on the nose. Kevin says sweet and spicy, taste of gingerbread, a little bit of honey, dash of white pepper. Kirikos's comment here is the one that stood out to me. Jasmine, sweet nose, and I can kind of get that. There was something there in the kind of spiciness that I couldn't quite place, but that might be it. You got apples for sure, followed by a burst of fresh aniseed, and then Roger says ginger. So I think getting some good feedback so far there, Brendan.
Yeah. I get a feeling that Kyriakos has been watching Gladiator earlier tonight, and it's just inspired these tasting notes. Jasmine, he's talking about the Gladiator's back garden in Spain. But yeah, it is. So it's I guess these tasting notes are great to see, and they're bang on. Like, there is spice, there's honey, there's sweetness, there's a tiny bit of savouriness, there's a lot of fruit. So Deanston with this waxiness, which I will talk about in a second, I'll tell you about how we make waxy. But it has an incredible amount of geekiness and take and luck and witchcraft to it, which is brilliant for some. But underneath that kind of incredible level of science, art, and luck that goes into making waxy, the other thing is just, even if you don't know it's waxy, people know it's just a really, really beautiful whiskey. It's just an amazing spirit that takes casks on in a brilliant way. It never over matures. It never gets drowned. It never dominates. It's just a really I don't think there's anything wrong with saying the whiskey's approachable. Not all whiskies are approachable, but I don't think it's a weakness for a whiskey to be approachable, and it just is something you can just pick up and dram away on. The 18-year-old, I just have it neat all the time. I don't even think it needs water. If you add some water to it, you will get a little bit more of the hibiscusness. And I'm saying that because it's the first whiskey. I will not attempt that word on whiskey number 5. But it is quite hibiscus and floral and perfumed if you stick a little bit of water in there as well. So, yeah, it's lovely. If it's all right, look, I'll jump back and answer James's question.
Yeah, I was actually just going to suggest that great minds think alike. I was just going to say the same thing.
Yeah, sorry, this is me hosting and answering. This is like my dream.
You're fine. That's fine. I'll turn my mic off and sit here. I'm happy with that.
If I ever go into Graham Norton, I'd just talk to myself and get my microphone switched off, I think, just for being an arse. But
I think the closest I'd ever be to getting on Graham Norton would be on that red chair,
I love it. So I kind of became a master distiller so I would say one thing, and also I did engineering at university, so chemical and process engineering. I'm telling this answer and it looks like James has actually been eaten by some sort of black sea monster. So it's a shame he asked this question and never got to hear the answer. He was just consumed by the smog or something. It looks like a labradoodle or something's just eating him. But so first of all, I did chemical engineering at university. So it's a very difficult degree. I didn't realise when I took it, and I really struggled with it. But it took forever to get through. But the good thing is when I left university, it was like, okay, I'm done with uni. And then most whiskey makers will tell you they knew at 3 or 4 years old that all they ever wanted to do was, be a whiskey maker. And if I could do a Roger Moore and raise an eyebrow, I would, because at 3 and 4, all I wanted to be was like a cowboy, and then eventually I wanted to be Paul McStay. Not like him. I just wanted to be Paul McStay for about 8 years, and then after that, I left uni, massively keen to get a job. So I actually got a job with GlaxoSmithKline first. So I used to ferment and make penicillin, believe it or not, which is great. It was a great job, but doing tastings for penicillin is very dull. It's like this one's powdered, this one's in capsule form, and this one's injectable. It was just never quite going to work. So I did fermentation and production of penicillin for a couple of years. But my now wife, girlfriend at the time, was homesick. That was down in England, South Coast. She's like, I really want to move home. So I started applying for jobs, and I got a job with Diageo. So again, it was just luck. And then with Diageo, I entered their graduate scheme. And they said, where do you want to work? And I said, I'll go wherever the best job is. And they went, great. And it's quite funny. So that's like 2006, 2005. They said, malt distilling, which has always been a bit of a sleepy hollow. There's a real trend in whiskey happening right now. And we need everyone to go to whiskey because we think it's got a big future in front of it. This is back when still malt whiskey was looked at as is there any point in making this? Should we not just sell off all the distilleries? So I joined, and I was there for a couple of months as a maltster. I used to take barley and turn it into malted barley. And then Diageo made a big announcement that we're going to build a brand new distillery to expand the production of single malt whiskey to support the growth of Johnnie Walker. And I was a chemical engineer. And they brought me in. They said, "Are you a chemical engineer?" I went, "Yes." And they're like, "So do you know how to design a distillery through chemical engineering?" And I lied and said yes, because I was the worst chemical engineer in the history of Strathclyde University. But I knew this was going to be cool. So then I got to work in a very small team. I had to sign an NDA and everything. It was hilarious. But the NDA was like the equivalent of, I don't know if you've seen The Simpsons a lot, where Homer Simpson has to take the oath in the Stonecutters. And it says all your hair will fall out except for free hairs and stuff. And it's like, it's already happened. But I had to sign an NDA promising not to sell any Diageo shares, of which I owned one. So it wasn't really that good for me to be kept secret. But I then got to work on and design a distillery called Rose Isle. So it's a very, very proud year for me. And during that year, I just learned so much. I did my whisky exams. The diploma in distilling usually takes you 3 years. I did all 3 in 1 year as a crash course because I had to learn. And then in that year, I got to design a distillery, which is amazing. But more than that, I just got the bug for whiskey. I'd been a bit of a whiskey drinker before, but once you're in it and you understand it and you work around people who have got 20 and 30 and 40 years of experience, I mean, I was just like a sponge. And I swear it's like the first time in my life that I studied for exams and genuinely enjoyed the content, which sounds so pathetic, I know, but it was just like a thing. And ever since, I've loved whiskey. So I then went from there, and then I worked in blending and leaving. So I used to put together the classic malts, physically put them together. You know, I wasn't nosing and tasting. Then I did a year in America, which was just cause, you know, it was America, it was great. Then I came back and I became the distillery manager at Oban. So I was there for 2 years, managing the distillery, which is amazing. I was the most senior person on site, but I was also the youngest person and the lowest paid, which was quite weird, but that was great. So I was the distillery manager when I was 28. Then I moved to Islay, and on Islay I looked after Lagavulin, Kalila and Portellen maltings, plus the visitor centres, plus the engineering centre. So it was a big job. And again, it was like at that stage, the best job of my life, and I loved it. And I did that for 3 years. And, you know, my colleagues roll their eyes now or play bingo every time I say I used to live on Islay, because in many ways, I wish I still did. I love where I live, you know, but I just, it's a magical place, and it's always in my heart, basically. So I spent 3 years in Islay, and then after that, I moved. I left Diageo, I joined Moët Hennessy, and I became the whiskey maker for Ardbeg and Glenmorangie. So I went from being a production guy, all distilling, knowing whiskey from back to front in terms of making it, to then becoming at the other end, taking the mature stuff and turning it into whiskey. Did that for 8 years under Dr. Bill Lumsden and learned a lot. And then after 8 years, I was meant to take over from him, but Dr. Bill's, you know, aging like Benjamin Button on Rewind. You know, he's just looking fantastic. Or sorry, he's aging like Benjamin Button, and I'm aging like Benjamin Button in Rewind. So I wasn't going to take over for him. So I started looking for other opportunities, and I'd always had my eye on. Well, I've loved Bunnahabhain since I lived in Islay, and I live right next door to Deanston. So eventually they sort of knocked on my door and said, "Do you want to come and work for us?" And it lets me put all of my experience together. So now I'm a distiller and a whiskey maker and a maturation guy. So it really is just the perfect job. So that's how I became a master distiller. Everyone does it in a different way. But it's a very, very, very long answer, but you said a dram in your hands, so hopefully it doesn't.
That was fantastic. Obviously, two great Scottish traditions, penicillin and whiskey.
Well, drinking drugs, you know, is another way to put it.
We're drinking drugs. So I was going to go more with the one thing that the Scots invented and the other thing that they stole from the Irish. But there you go. Brilliant. Well, that was genuinely fantastic, Brendan. It might be though time to come on to the next whiskey. I don't know if we're going too fast for anyone in the chat, but I know that 18 went down really fast for me.
Yeah, it's just a super drinkable dram and a beautiful whiskey, and one that sadly we just can't make enough of. But I'm working on it. I'm trying to make more, and it's just a fantastic whiskey. But right, second whiskey we're going to try is my favourite Deanston. It's been my favourite Deanston for feels like 10 years, I think. So, and I joined Deanston and the other distilleries coming up for 2 years ago. But my favourite is Deanston Virgin Oak. So that's what we're going to try now.
Fantastic.
That'll work. Yeah. So Deanston Virgin Oak's at the same strength, 46.3. This one's a non-age stated whiskey. So with this one, what we do is we mature it in bourbon barrels. So it starts its life similar to the 18-year-old, but obviously it doesn't stay in those casks for 18 years. But what we do is after a decent period of maturation in bourbon barrels, we transfer the entire contents into a vat and then fill them into virgin oak. So virgin oak is casks from America, American white oak casks that have never contained any liquid. Usually these would go to bourbon distilleries to make bourbon, but we just circumvent that process and bring them all the way to Scotland. I've made 2 tweaks to the recipe, even though it was my favourite before I joined. You know, once you get this job, you get to see all the secrets. You know, it's like being in charge of KFC and getting to see the secret blend of herbs and spices, or getting to see how the secret sauce is made at a different company. And when I looked at the recipe, I thought, I think can make this go from being my favourite whiskey to still be my favourite whiskey, but being even better. So what we did is we upped the average age of maturation in the bourbon barrels before it's then transferred into the virgin oak. And then the other thing is the virgin oak is now exclusively char 4. So medium toasted, heavily charred virgin oak barrels, and we'll only accept char 4. So there's no longer char 3 or char 2 in there. What that means is it's just, if the analogy was toast, toasted bread, toast. Like a char 1 would be that kind of, it's almost just yellow and it barely melts the butter. A char 4 would be what most people would call burnt toast, but I would cover in butter and eat all day long. But when you char a cask like that, you make it more flavourful, is a kind of simple way to put it. But you increase the amount of flavour-forming compounds in the oak, and you also increase the porosity as well. So it really soaks into the wood. So you get this crazy big hit of like vanilla wafers, of ice cream, but also ice cream that's had a ridiculous amount of dried cinnamon and nutmeg and ground up cloves mixed in with it. So it should be spicy and sweet and layered and very waxy. Told you I would say the word waxy quite a lot. But I love this whiskey. Again, I think this is a sipper neat. It's actually great over ice. And if anyone wants to join along with me on a Friday night, myself and everyone else at Deanston, we have an old-fashioned Friday with Deanston Virgin Oak. It makes a cracking old-fashioned.
In the distillery? I might call down.
What's that, sorry?
Is that in the distillery? I might call down.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome. Or wander along to my house. I'm like 4. You're basically in between me and the distillery, so wander along here and I'll make you one.
Sounds like a plan. I won't get in the car after this tasting though, but maybe down the line. There's I just wanted to point out, actually, I'm going to come to the fantastic taste notes that come in, but I forgot to mention on the Deanston 18. The Deanston 18, folks, is only £68, and you'll get a discount on that at the end of this. So I often talk on these tastings, Brendan, about we try whiskey and it could be amazing, but then you kind of go, okay, well it's 100 and X or it's 300, and you kind of always have to, especially in this current economy, balance it against what you're actually paying for it. And I think for both these, because the Virgin Oak here is £35.50. Where are you going with such a good whiskey at that price? So I just thought I'd get that in there because I meant to say that before we moved on. But there's some fantastic tasting notes coming in. Pazza says vanilla on the nose, honey nut loops with cream. I like that tasty note. Paul gets honey and cinnamon toast. Steph gets banana jelly beans on the nose. There's lots of banana, lots of vanilla coming up, and I suppose that's what I know it's a cliche, but that's what you would expect from a good Quercus Alba cask. But it's really coming through there. And Roger is citrus nose, light smoke, and the palate toffee oak, and the finish is spice. So some fantastic
big spice there at the end. Big spice at the end is what we're looking for when we know we've got a batch of this that works. So, right, let me jump in really quickly to what waxy is, because I keep saying waxy, but essentially Deanston Distillery is in the town of Doon. I'm in Stirling right now. It's 10 minutes north of me. It used to be an old cotton mill, so it was built in the 1700s, and then it burnt down, just like every mill ever has, and it was rebuilt in the 1820s, ran as a mill until the 60s. And then eventually in the 60s, it was turned into a distillery in 1966, actually, and fired up in 1967. I think the intention of the founders of the distillery was to make a classic Speyside fruity spirit. And why would you not? Because Speyside fruity spirit is one of the most fantastic ways to enjoy single malt. So they put in a big traditional mash tun with a rake and plough, and it's still there. There's no loutering in our mash tun. So what you get is a crazy crystal clear worts, which is a sugary liquid. We then ferment for up to 90 hours. You're looking at 85 to 90 hours for every fermentation, which makes a super concentrated fruity beer. It's almost too fruity. This is all key to making waxy, but the real big difference happens in the still house. Normally you would have a vessel for each still. One vessel would contain the low wines from one still and the heads and tails from the spirit still distillation, and it would fill up with that, and then that would all get put into the next distillation. It's what's called a balanced distillation. But at Deanston, they ran out of space in the still house. So rather than building individual low wines and faints receivers, as they're called, rather than building individual vessels for each distillate, they let them all gather in one big vessel, which is called the faints charger. And the faints charger has got a bit of a Harry Potter life because it just sits under the stairs and lives under the stairs and is barely looked at. But it's the most important vessel in the entire distillery, because in there, the vessel never completely fills and it never completely empties. It just kind of constantly goes up and down in volume, but it also goes up and down in ABV. And that creates certain chemical reactions or changes in state. So some things that would stay liquid in solution come out as solid. And when they come out as solid, a few other things come out as solid, and they kind of emulsify and combine, and they rise to the top of the distillate in the faint charger. And it's like this crazy black magic. It's like this black smear of waxy oil that sits on top of the distillate. The marketing team hate me talking about this, but you know, tough. They'll fire me eventually. But if you could see it, it's unbelievable. Just this slick of oil, this black gold sitting on top of our spirit. Distill that, you go from having a very fruity Speyside whiskey to having this crazy, unique, waxy spirit. Think like it is close to fruity, so that's why you get the apples, the oranges. That's why you get the citrus and stuff like that. But it's not like a citrus fruity spirit, because you would get that right on the nose of the new make. Imagine it's like biting into an orange like an apple. Just pick up an orange, go into your local supermarket, one of these, and try this. I'm not doing it, you'll get arrested. But just pick up an orange and bite into it. It's like there's texture first, but then as your teeth start to sink into that orange, there's a spritz of citrus, there's orange oils, there's texture, and then eventually once you bite right into the fruit, there is a burst of sweetness and fruitiness and delight, and that's waxy. That in a nutshell, in a wax shell, is how we make waxy. And then that spirit is just so unbelievably good to work with. It works in every cask I've put it in. It works at young ages. It works at old ages. It works in the middle. It works at high strength, at low strength. It's almost too flexible and usable that we almost have to, you know, kind of restrict ourselves from going too far with all the innovations we could do with this amazing whiskey. But that's why I love Virginal, because these are pretty powerful casks that it's taken on, but you still get that waxy orange peel, orange oil flavour of Deanston in there as well.
No, that's fantastic, and that's a brilliant kind of metaphor or image. Although it's an interesting one, because obviously, you know, especially in the winter, you get waxed oranges. So, yeah. So there you go.
If I could say, you know, what personal advice, and I'm not a doctor, but rather than buying waxed oranges, you know, just buy Deanston. It could be a better way to, you know, look after yourself. But as a non-doctor, I'm not sure that that's medically advisable, but that's what I'm doing.
Or use an orange as your garnish in your virgin oak Deanston old fashioned.
Yes, yeah, that's one of the reasons it works so well. But generally, see if you express out the orange on an old fashioned, that kind of sensation, that's what I'm looking for in the new make spirit as it runs off the stills.
And Paul has agreed with this, some orange feel in the precision. Brilliant. Yeah, well, I don't know if anyone's got any questions coming in that. Well, Christian has talked about the ages in this cask.
Yep. It's a question we're always asked. You know, it's a non-age stated whiskey. So from batch to batch, the age might change a little. And I am genuinely not allowed to communicate on age, as is every other whiskey maker, if you make a non-age stated whiskey. But it's not 12 years old, because let's be honest, we have a Deanston 12 years old. So it's younger than 12 years old. But I would also say it's not as young as you think it is if you're a cynic, because it's certainly not ready after just a couple of years. But there's a range of ages in there, 2-3 different years of vintage, but it is a non-age stated whiskey.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin has asked about your use of sherry casks. I know that the 18 has sherry hogshead finish, isn't it? The one we just tried first.
So the 18 tends to be bourbons, tends to be all bourbons, but it could have some refill sherry cask that would act like an ex-bourbon. But no, we do have sherry casks. Don't really have like a permanent expression in sherry, if I'm honest. Probably something that we'll look at, but we do there's a Pedro Jimenez sherry finish in the shop right now. There's various experiments that we work on with sherry. Works great in sherry. We also have like a permanently available product in Asia. Deanston's like huge in Taiwan and China, and they did ask for a country specific sherry cask. So I'm doing more and more work with sherry in Deanston, and again, it's something that just works really wonderfully, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And before we move on, actually, I had a question. Just jumping back to the 18. You were saying it was going to be delisted, and what was driving that? Was it sales? Was it lack of availability of aged stock, or what was the reason?
Yeah, I think the root cause was a lack of branding, you know. And then I arrived with a cape and, you know, like my hands like this, like a superhero would. No, I honestly don't know what was driving it. I think some people weren't sure there was enough stock there. I think some people were wondering, you know, I think there's some real believers in Deanston within the company, and this is not a criticism. I think there's other people whose focus was on other things. And I just think there was a bit of confusion and people went, oh, is there really any point in keeping on making this? And when I arrived, they told me, you know, we're going to delist the 18 and maybe we'll do a 15 or something. And I was just like, this is madness. This is absolute madness. No, we can't do this. And I was like, it was my first week, like my very first week that someone told me that. And I was like, you need to give me some time. So off I went, had a look at the stock. I got working with a guy called John Hughes. So John Hughes is the kind of finance stocks manager, if you like. And I only just met him and I was like, listen, I really need your help. I need you to just look at the stock and get samples and pull this and pull that. And then Josh and my team, who's like the assistant blender, he was a trainee blender at that stage. He was only like 1 week in the job too. So I was like, right, we're going for this. And we went looking through all the stock and I put together a batch. There was enough stock there. I used a bit of over-aging was the way that I solved the puzzle. But I just knew, I've been a Deanston fan my whole life, and I know that most people who love Deanston 18. And I was like, I don't think people quite appreciate that taking this away it's more than just removing one product for the range. This is like taking out one of the vital organs of Deanston. So thankfully, a few people, when they heard me say it, were like, yeah, we thought this too. And we got behind it, launched it, and it did win this massive award, which was obviously fantastic, but it was really important for Deanston too.
No, fantastic. So what's next on the agenda? Kevin's got a good question there, but I might come to that after we've tried our next one. So what's next
on the agenda?
What's next?
Yeah, I almost misread that question. I was going to say, get this whiskey tasting over with, and then it's on to Warzone, which is just launched, you know, with my mates. Then I caught myself and I went, nah, let's go for Deanston 12. Let's go for Deanston 12 now.
Perfect.
Because what we're kind of doing here is we're tasting the core range of Deanston, if you like. We're tasting the core range. Virgin Oak, which is the youngest. Let's say it's the non-age stated, but it's the spiciest. We then have the 18-year-old, which has got this just austere and beautiful softness and wonderfulness in there as well. And then on this one, this is our classic. This is the Deanston that most people recognise, the Deanston most people know. Waxy spirit, 12 years in bourbon casks, first fill, second fill and refill. and it creates something that's just kind of incredible, you know. So I'm just going to pour mine. It's kind of like
a much different nose than the first couple.
Yeah,
and it's a lot darker. Is this natural coloration as well, or? Always,
we refuse to add spirit caramel to our products. So I do get. Do you know, there is a reason that whiskey companies add spirit caramel to their whiskies, and most of the time it is with genuine intentions, and it's just to help consumers enjoy whiskey. And that's me backing the competition. But there's a few nefarious characters out there. You all know who they are, but I'll never say who they are. But the ones that are, you know, there's 3-year-olds the same colour as their 40-year-old. Again, that promotes a Roger Moore eyebrow, if anyone can do that. But we do get these at least once a week with people saying, "Hi, I love this whiskey, but I've just bought another one and it's way darker or it's way lighter. Are you now using sherry? Have you changed the recipe? Have you done this? Have you done that?" It's just no. Like whiskey, I was lucky enough to go to Champagne once, and I met some champagne makers, and there's a phrase in French, and it's like, you can't write down nature, you know, and it's barley that grows in a field, trees that grow in a ground that are turned into casks by people, toasted or that are then filled by hand from a whiskey that's fermented by a living creature, yeast, you know, there's just so many variables. There's a hot summer, there's a cold summer, you know, you bottle it in October or you bottle it in March. All of these things drive different colour. But what I would say is we're always keeping the flavour as consistent as you can. It's way easier to spot a change in colour. It's just much more obvious because our eyes are much more, you know, sensitive to that, if you like. The change in colour is much more nuanced. The change in flavour is much more nuanced than the change in colour. So yeah, it's just a good way to show off that we don't add colour, but the recipe remains the same. So it is a dark one. Is the casks are a bit tighter. Some of them held on to their strength a little more. Who knows? But what you're looking for again, yeah, it's got. I always call it. It's almost like red fruits, but it's not red fruits. It's where my head goes. But it's oaky, but it's like cherry wood, cherry oak.
Ian has said in the chat berry jam, and I could see that, you know, because they did that kind of preserved red fruits almost, you know, which obviously gives it a slightly different element.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It's quite bourbony. If anyone drinks bourbon at all, you know, first of all, stop. Now just drink Deanston. It'll be good for my pension. But if you drink bourbon, it does have that lovely kind of oakiness, that depth. It has this kind of brown sugar and white sugar mixed together, kind of sweetness. But definitely just, again, that orange peel, orange oil, waxiness running right through it. And again, it's just a lovely whiskey. They're all variations on a theme, you know, virgin oak with that intense finish in the char 4 casks. 12-year-old, just that classic balance of time and cask. 18-year-old, just longevity and the kind of softness that comes with age. But they all just sort of run along a similar theme, and it's just a great way to show Deanston at its best cask, I would say. Mm-hmm. Now, Deanston honestly works in every cask, so we do a lot of innovation. And the reason we do a lot of innovation is because it works in so many bloody casks. It's spectacular. There's a port cask finish at the shop right now, which is just incredible. There's Oloroso, there's Pedro Jimenez. There was a Paulo Cortado that came out in 2019, I think, which I fell in love with. I mean, I bought 2 bottles of it. I got 2 samples of it. I managed to trade for a bottle of it, which was like a half full bottle. It was just something really, really, really stunning. And it was a cool thing because it wasn't long after that I got approached about the job, and I was able to talk about it in the interview with this Paulo Cortado. Was incredible. Why is that not a permanent part of your range? And that might be a hint, ladies and gentlemen, but possibly not tomorrow, but I am desperately keen to launch a permanent Deanston and Paulo Cortado, because Paulo Cortado, a type of sherry that actually has a bit of luck in its manufacture. It doesn't happen all the time. Deanston with waxy, again, something unique, and they just seem to be kindred spirits.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Paulo Cortado finished whiskies, but also we've got a tasting in 2 weeks' time with Dunville's from whiskey produced by Ecklinville in Northern Ireland. I don't know if you tried it, Brendan, but they have a Paolo Cotardo in their range that'll be on that tasting. And theirs is a bit like for an Irish whiskey, it's a bit like Deanston, and it's double distilled, and it's robust, not the right word, but it's got a big presence as a spirit on its own anyway. And the Paolo Cotardo really works. It just makes it really, really juicy, which has my mouth watering, because when you say bourbon, I think this has all the right elements of the bourbon. It just maybe lacks the kind of tannic hit on the front, but it's other than that, it's really there. And we got some excellent taste notes coming. The berry jam I mentioned. There was one chewy we had, and we had a comment from Jeff on the whiskey is great, but the sandwiches in the Deanston Distillery Cafe are the best in Scotland. It's fantastic sandwiches in there. I must say I've had them myself. And then Roger gets a bit of caramel nuttiness on the palate. So yeah, no, it's a really good whiskey for its price point, for its age, for everything. Like, it really holds up. I'm going to take a picture of that comment, Jeff. So thank you, but I'll show that to the team, because you're right. The club sandwich in particular, I've had to buy a new girdle. I used to be a skinny guy, but now, my God, my girdle's under more tension than like the Garrian Bridge. But it's because of the club sandwiches. They're delicious. Love it. Chewy. I love that word. I'm desperately trying to do a Star Wars impression, but I won't. But chewy, I think, is a great word. Chewy is a great other descriptor for what I am seeing as waxy. It's this texture, this long lastingness of it that's happening there. We got because Paul has said that this has got the same character as a virgin oak, but it's a bit more intense, which I think is a good comment. I know that I don't want to repeat ground we've been over, but just James had a question there when we were talking about the caramel coloring. Now, I know we don't use it, but you do, in your, given your extensive CV you listed today, Brendan, in your opinion, do you think adding caramel color does affect anything other than the color?
So as with every question, it depends, but in the truly, it doesn't affect the flavour. If you add small amounts of caramel, you can balance the colour without changing the flavour. And there's some people who think you add spirit caramel and it makes it taste sweet like caramel and honey. Spirit caramel is extremely bitter. So it's an extremely bitter flavour, this E105A. There's a for and against for adding spirit caramel. I mean, if we're all honest with ourselves here, I can see from the tasting notes and I can see from the questions that are coming in that you're all dyed-in-the-wool whiskey drinkers, okay? And you know your stuff. And any of you walk into a whiskey bar or a whiskey shop, you know exactly how to navigate your way around that. But all of us were beginners once upon a time. It's really intimidating walking into a whiskey shop. So you can imagine if you're just starting your journey in whiskey, and whatever whiskey you get into is the one that you love, if you suddenly start seeing it changing colour and stuff, it does freak some people out. So there is, let's say, a good reason why someone went, let's put some caramel in it, a tiny amount that just balances off the flavour. And I get that. But really for us, we're not on a mission to be the #1 selling whiskey on earth. We're not going to make a 40% Deanston that's super approachable and light and easy. We want our whiskies to be delicious and beautiful, but they really are the kind of classic, authentic single malt whiskies that have made this product, this national treasure, so good. So that's the route we're going to go down. I'm not going to suddenly start twisting the knife and campaigning for a complete ban on spirit caramel, because there is people who are starting out and are wanting to find a whiskey that makes sense, and that's fine. The thing I really disagree with is people who put so much spirit caramel into their whiskies, because there's no limit to it. It's not like it must be 1 drop per 1,000 litres or whatever the hell the ratio would be. It's people can just put in as much as they want. Whenever you see a non-aged whiskey coming out and it's, darker than a 60-year-old whiskey I have in my warehouse, that's where I, sort of throw my hands up in, distress, that's a bit I disagree with. But, if I had a gun to a head or a complete, Brendan, it's yes or no, should we ban spirit caramel? I would say we should. I would not that my opinion matters, but like in Germany, you have to display it on the label. You have to say with colouring in Germany. Yeah. I would be a fan of that as a compromise, Yeah, I think that's a great point. But again, there's a little bit you have to be careful on. I don't know if anyone here is on Reddit. Is anyone on Reddit? You know,
I go on Reddit occasionally.
Yeah. So I've never been on Facebook in my life, and it was just because of my job, and I used to travel a lot with Glenmorangie. I joined Instagram just because people used to say, what do you do when you go abroad? And I was trying to explain, you know, that like I talk to people about whiskey and I tell them about whiskeys I've made, and they couldn't quite get their heads around it. So I joined Instagram. Now you would think I invented Instagram, the way I'm obsessed with it and the way I talk about it. So I'm a late adopter to things, but just recently I went on to Reddit, and my God, people there are passionate. But there is a belief that Leipzig, another whiskey we make, which does not have spirit caramel in it, there's a belief that it does have spirit caramel because one of the Leipzigs in Germany was mislabeled. So again, I agree in principle that the right thing is to say it contains caramel, but it has to be, you have to be careful because mistakes happen sometimes, and it doesn't matter how many times I tell people, you know, but it doesn't have spirit caramel in it. They'll just say, no, you're not telling the truth, or you don't know anything, or you're lying, you know. So it can get, it's a very, very emotive subject. But I think
totally, what we do, I feel like that's an outlier or one of those kind of you know, exceptional cases that doesn't necessarily defeat the whole idea. I mean, no, I think people, I don't know if everyone in the chat agrees, but I think a lot of people would agree that that, you know, what a lot of people want to see from the whiskey industry in Scotland is just a bit more transparency, like, you know. Yeah, and that's not just in colouring, but on loads of different aspects, you know.
Yeah, transparency in age though is a misguided one. Just being completely honest here, I do think I have a reputation for being honest. Transparency in age is not the thing that you're looking for. People think,
I totally agree. Yeah,
a 7, an 8, and a 9 mixed together. It's like, because sometimes 7, 8, and 9 makes it taste exactly the way it does. Other times you need to add 12 and 14 to it. Other times you need to add 5 and 6 to it. You know, so that one. But you're right with caramel colouring. But the way we and a couple of other of the good citizens in the whiskey industry should do it is we should shout from the rooftops about the fact that we do not use caramel colouring and we do not chill filter. And James, I think it was, like, please don't go down that route of mainstream 40% for the masses. We're not gonna. There was one small experiment at Deanston, and hey, if you never fail, you're not trying hard enough, is a statement I live by. And the company tried a 40%, and it was just still a very lovely whiskey, but it wasn't Deanston. You know, legally it was Deanston, but it wasn't Deanston. So I'm quite proud to say I killed it within 2 months of arriving at the business. I was like, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Instead of making this 40% product, let's make more virgin oak. And the virgin oak, the response from consumers, I will say consumers, the response from you, lovely people on this tasting was unanimous. You know, it was like, this is way better than that 40% product. So yeah, we are not going down that route. We have no interest in becoming the #1 selling whiskey on earth. We don't. Very interested in being the most awarded or the highest quality or something like that, but volume and sales, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that.
Yeah. No, totally. And Christian has raised a good question here, but I want to move away from we could get bogged down in this quagmire for ages. So yeah, I think might be time to come on to the next one. Do you want to go to the 2000 organic next, or the 2007 Calvados?
2007 Calvados. So let's go with this one. I want to finish on the organic, but so 2007 Calvados. This is Deanston matured in bourbon casks, refill and first fill bourbon cask. And it's had quite a healthy 1 or 2 year finish in Calvados. I've been describing this quite a lot as a Marmite whiskey. So just quickly, I'll jump in because I think Kevin's asked this question twice and we missed it. How many litres of spirit is made annually at Deanston? Deanston can make, so full capacity, about 2.7, 2.8 million litres of alcohol. The reason I don't know is never ran at capacity. So it's making 2.4 at the moment. I am pushing as hard as I can for it to go up to full capacity. And then also I'm trying to trade less of it. But we'll always trade some Deanston for blends because waxy whiskey is key to some of the most famous iconic blends in the world. I'm just trying to reduce that so that we can grow our own single malt offering. After that, there's no plans for some crazy massive expansion. You know, there's not, but I would like it get it up to that near 3 million kind of stage that we could get to.
That's fantastic, and Luke in the chat has answered Christian's question, so that's brilliant. So, and Adam, before we actually start, while people are sipping away on that, Adam's just asked me the price on that. I haven't told you the price. I said that. So the 12-year-old is £38, and the 2007 Calvados is £95. So they're both before your 40% or 4%. Jesus, 15% discount.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I just seen Christian's question, and Luke has answered a bit, but yeah, Christian, Deanston Kentucky cask is stopped. There'll not be another batch of it made, but there was some made, so it's out in the marketplace now, so it'll sell through. It's still a lovely whiskey, don't get me wrong. It's still a lovely whiskey. It's just I don't think it carries the credentials of the texture that we want going forward. So pick yourself a bargain if you like, but there'll be no more batches of that made. You know, that decision was made, it's a year ago, actually. It's a year ago that we made that decision, which kind of feels right, you know. So yeah, Calvados cask. It's apple Calvados. So I'm not a Calvados maker, so please don't ask me the vintage or the style or which Bombay yeast was used in it or anything like that. But Calvados is just a lovely cask that you can use in making whiskies. We had a very successful Bunnahabhain Calvados. We tried some with Deanston, and like I say, this happened before my time. So Julianne in my team was the master blender. She worked on this product, and she just bought a lot of interesting casks, and Calvados really caught her eye. And she's like, this is fun, but also funky and different. So it creates a hell of a lot of green fruits. So you're looking for apples, you're looking for pears, you're looking for almost, baked apples, remember that? You used to like bake apples in a microwave or whatever, and then get the juices and caramelize it. It's a real, do you know what I love about this whiskey is every time I pour it in the glass, it's different. So recently I was at a festival and I was pouring it in the glass and I was like, do you know what? It's not my favorite. It's not really happening for me, but the one in the glass right now, I'm going, Jesus, this is like a completely different whiskey. I'm getting that kind of burnt sugar, toasted apple craziness going on in there, and it's really showing up lovely tonight, I think.
I'm glad I finally copped on when you meant that the whiskey tastes different. I thought you meant that you use a different glass each time, and I was like, all right, that's each to their own. But
I love it. Yeah, so super fruity, lots of that kind of lovely white apple flesh and juice in there. I'm pretty special.
Roger said, obviously apple on the nose, palate apple, zesty, ends with caramel. Paula says apples, very fruity. Because I'm just going to skip over some of the apples because it's bang on. We great to see it in the chat, but I could just be saying apples for the next 5 minutes if I read them all out. And rich and thick and creamy. And Steph says vinegar, apple vinegar. But and then baked apples with honey. But so that's some brilliant tasting notes, folks. Keep them coming. But yeah.
It's also so the Calvados tends to be in French oak when it's matured. So it's also quite tannic, and tannic in whiskey means body usually, a dryness, an intensity, and also a lovely spiciness. Spicy like white pepper almost. This kind of intense white and cracked black pepper. There's an immediacy to this whiskey, which is like it kind of like bombards the palate with a whole load of flavour all at once.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm a big fan of Calvados, and I totally agree with Craig's commentary. He says a desert whiskey or dessert whiskey, sorry, if there was such a thing. Totally agree. And it's brilliant if you're if you're in France, finishing a meal with a Calvados or an eau de vie or something. It is really great, and I think especially with the way, not the whiskeys we're trying tonight, but in general, some of the prices in Scotch and Irish whiskey are going these days. You kind of wonder how long before we start drinking more cognac and Calvados, because you can pick up some smashing high age statement Calvadoses for cheap as chips.
Look, I'm here working on a Thursday night, putting my heart and soul into this, and you come out with that nonsense.
Well, I said, with the exception of the whiskies here,
ladies and gents, just scratch that from the record. Then I'm a judge here, jury. Do not enter that into the record. None of that foreign muck. We're on the Scotch here. But no,
yeah, well, I mean, we might have trouble importing it with the European Union not being in the EU anymore and stuff. So.
Hopefully not. But yeah, sherry's the other one that always tickles me. You know, what a cheap sherry, let's say, is what, £8, but like a really classy, unbelievable, best in class sherry is like maybe 15 or 20 quid. You know, so you can really premiumize for very little money, and that bottle will last you all year round. Port is something similar in places, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to convince some of the powers that be at the Whisky Shop to let us do, because we do our W Club exclusives. We've actually got at least 2, maybe 3 more coming out before the end of the year. I think we should do a W Club exclusive sherry, like a proper Amontillado or Palo Cortado. You can get, see if a bodega in Spain will allow us do an independent bottling of one of them. We'll see. Might be a year or so in the making, but that's going to try and be my legacy at the Whisky Shop.
Yeah. Oh, so top marks to Chris Friend. Yeah, chilies. That's the French oak. That's the tannins. So tannins in Bordeaux wines and stuff will give it body and allow it to age out and mature in the glass and stuff. In whiskey, you need to be careful with French oak. It can be a bad player pretty quickly, but if you get the balance right, it shows up as spiciness. Lots of different spiciness, but definitely you get chilies. You get like a real chili kick when you get it right.
And how just actually tying in with Luke's question there, he says this one works well at a drop of water or a higher ABV, and obviously this is a jump up in ABV and it's a jump up in price. And how limited is this as a release?
I'm going to refer to Luke and Johnny on the call, who will know that information, because
marvelous. We'll watch the chat for that one. So and we got Demerara sugar in as a taste note from David. I like that.
Yeah.
Definitely. And Alistair says it has good legs. So
it's again that structure, texture, body, legs. These are the things that Deanston's. This is why it is. But Deanston is coming to life right now. I have to say that. It's always been a bit of a, if you know kind of thing. If you know Deanston's great, you know it, but no one else does. But it really is starting to catch attention now, and people really are starting to fall in love with it. And it is because it's just a classy whiskey.
So Lucas said they left 100 cases outside the distillery shop. So if anyone's still fit enough to drive, so no, there's 100 cases available outside of the distillery. So yeah, that's good. So yeah, relatively limited. So maybe worth picking one up, folks. £95, but obviously we'll get the discount in there as well.
Yeah, I love it. Right, ladies and gents, last whiskey, but. What I'd say is that's the last whiskey, but I'll hang around and answer any questions you want. But I'll also stick my name and my Instagram in here as well, so you can get me on LinkedIn or on Instagram if you have any questions you were too shy to ask or you thought about just after or whatever. But the last whiskey
you weren't lying when you say you've got it all in on Instagram now. But.
Oh yeah, I'm obsessed. But it's just easier. People sometimes ask for my email address, and I'm like, listen, I genuinely get 1,000 emails a day. So I'm like, there's no point. I'm just giving up reading them. I just don't read them. So because I just can't. So, but if you send me Instagram or whatever, it's not that many, or LinkedIn, which is great too. But last whiskey of the night, you spelt it wrong, Luke. But last whiskey of the night is an organic. So Deanston is a whiskey of firsts. We're one of the first whiskies to be fully powered by green electricity. In 1966, when we established, we're powered by a water turbine. We're one of the first whiskies to insist on non-chill filtration and all natural colouring, arguably the first whiskey to do that. We're also the first whiskey to make an officially certified, fully organic whiskey. Now, organic is a name that has almost changed over time and is maybe dated a little bit. So you might say, oh, if this is an organic whiskey, does that mean all your other whiskies are not organic? And of course it doesn't. I don't think you can be any more organic than 3 ingredients: malted barley, water, and yeast, and matured in oak casks. But to get organic certification, it's like a labour of love we do, and we do 2 mashes a year, which are organic. So normally we do 12 mashes in a week, and we'll run for 40 or 46 weeks a year. But there's just 2 mashes right after the silent season where we go full organic. So we clean down every nook and cranny and corner and edge of the distillery. It's polished up. Think like one of those Disney movies where they're singing a really annoying song, you know, and squirrels and butterflies and stuff are cleaning everything and polishing it up. That's what we do, and it costs a fortune. And then we buy 2 batches of organic barley grown like 10, 15 miles from the distillery, and that's all great, and it's fully certified. But it's in the process when we do that and we do it slower, it creates a Deanston that is lower on waxiness. So still waxy, but it doesn't have that intense, thick waxiness of normal Deanston, normal, traditional Deanston. And then we mature it. So we'll release an organic each year, but the volumes are minute. There's almost none of it. The cost of making it, you're looking at triple, quadruple the cost for each litre that we manufacture, from all the cleaning down, the loss of yield, the great expense of the extra barley, all the audits, all the everything we pay for. It's a financial nightmare, but it is just like a bit of a labour of love. And then for the longest part, we used to just use virgin oak to mature it, but then we started to build relationships, and that's the royal we. All of this organic work is something I've inherited, so I'm not saying I invented this plan or drove this plan, but it's Deanston did this, you know. And what I've started to notice is when you use organic sherries, like this one is, it really responds to the sherry in a crazy way. So when you use an organic Fino, a normal Fino cask, you'd expect a light touch of sherry, very floral, little bit of white sugar. But when we use organic Fino in our organic sherries, it goes off like an Oloroso or almost like a Pedro Jimenez. So with this one, it's not a sherry bomb, because to me a sherry bomb is a negative, it just means all sherry. But this is a Deanston organic, all from the year 2000. So a vintage 2000, 21-year-old organic sherry cask Deanston that is really just something pretty special, if I'm honest. Just a beautiful, beautiful whiskey, really intense, creamy fudge, sticky toffee pudding almost, but still with a bit of spice, and yeah, completely and utterly with that lovely waxy element running from start to finish through the whiskey.
That's really great. I love that. It's really got all those kind of classic sherry points, like the raisins, like Roger says there in the chat, spicy grapes, and a finish with spicy orange peel. It really works. Kira Costa says 51% cask strength at 21 years. Is there some leaky casks there?
It's a funny thing, like, I can't even remember if this is cask strength or if it's nominated strength, but that's kind of normal for a cask strength whiskey. There's lots of cask strength whiskies at that age that would go down to 46, even 48, 40. What you need to remember is the cask strength whiskies that make it to you on the shelf, don't forget that's not the standard. That tends to be the highest ones, because there'll be lots of cask strength whiskies that have fallen down to 46 or even lower, and they just aren't the ones that come out as a cask strength whiskey. They're incorporated into a marriage to make an 18-year-old, or a marriage to make a this or that. So in general, cask strengths, the ones you see tend to be the highest ones rather than the lowest. But when we do this one we took at cask strength, but the reason we picked it at this cask strength was because it tasted incredible, you know. But yeah, something in the 50s at 21 years old, that to me is a perfectly normal strength for a cask strength.
Yeah, Lucas said he confirms it's a cask strength. What percentage do you cask at?
So we'll do a variety, but 63.5 this will have went in it. But I'm casking more and more whiskies at higher strengths. So I'll just go in at like 68, which is what it comes off the still at. I've done lots of experimentation in the last 10 years, and I think it is, I've just never ever found a good answer to why do we cask at 63.5. So that's why I would change it.
Craig has said, wow, if you've if you'd had never tried whiskey and had a taste of this, you'd be sold. It's funny because I actually personally just, and it's all subjective, I think the opposite. I love this, but I love it because I know what whiskey tastes like, you know. And I think this is more for maybe slightly the more mature palate. That would just be my personal thing. Maybe Craig's spot on. And we had, Paul says something oddly earthy in there, question mark. That's the Gannic, Paul. That's the Gannic from the organic, gives it that earthiness. But it is, yeah, it's got a funkiness. I'm going off camera, but I am here. while you're there, Jonathan has asked how many bottles were produced, and Johnny's answered with 2784. And this is £180, Craig, but you'll get 15% off that. So that's over 20 quid off that. So, you know, it's remarkable. And then you get entered into the chance to win a golden dram. So like, yeah, I mean, life is too short to be doing anything else. Kevin has said, would you mature any whiskey in casks that have held beer? I feel like this is one you'd have a very strong opinion on, Brendan.
Yeah, it has been done before. So there's a dragon milk stout Deanston out there. But if I'm totally honest, it's not where I'm committing the majority of my creative juices to. I love beer, I really do. I don't think beer casks have anything like the impact on whiskey that we want them to, you know, because it's super cool. We all love beer, and I'd really love to get a, you know, Guinness stout cask or a couple others, but it just doesn't work for me as much. So if we find something exciting and something really interesting, then sure, we'll try it. But whiskey and beer, to me, I think the jury's still out.
James has asked, would you say it's a novelty?
Yeah, I would. But
that's interesting, because we nearly had the Dragon's Milk on this tasting lineup, and it never quite made the cut. So I wonder, would you have said that if we were sipping on that right now?
No, I think I would. But I'd say like all whiskey, like, there's nothing wrong with a novelty. You know, all whiskey's a novelty. Like, I think some people still argue that red wine is a novelty. And I'd say, don't forget about 5 years ago, maybe 10, Pedro Jimenez was a novelty in whiskey. I would actually argue now that Pedro Jimenez is becoming overplayed in whiskey. You know, I just think it's, you know, it's like, you know, my son, who thank God has stayed in bed. I had to put him to bed about 5 minutes before this started, and I was like, he's going to come wandering in and create hassle. But he'll put tomato sauce on anything, you know, because he's 5. That's what you do. But I get the kind of same analogy in whiskey right now. I keep hearing about people like, oh, we've got a brand new release and it's Pedro Jimenez. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, you know. So there's nothing wrong with novelties. You could also call them innovations or experiments. And I think beer's a big experiment right now. But I don't see me making a 15-year-old Deanston in IPA casks as a permanent release. I just don't think you get... I think it becomes more of a... If I was to come on and do like a 15-year-old IPA, I think I would be sort of shouting the tasting notes at you before you drank it, rather than encouraging you to put them in the chat, because I just don't think it has the same impact on whiskey. Whereas beer in whiskey casks, the other way around, putting beer into ex-whiskey casks, that is almost like so strong that it completely overpowers the beer. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, Alistair's just said in the chat that beer seems to work better in whiskey casks. I mean, the company I used to work for, we used to do... we were an independent bottler, and we used to take some of our casks and give them over to a local brewery who would then mature some fantastic beers in them. And then in the pub, you could on draft have the beer that was matured in the cask, the whiskey that you're drinking. And it was a nice novelty. And I think for a particular Irish blend, like a famous one, maybe one of the biggest selling whiskeys in the world, they have lots of different range of beer casks. And I'm not saying they're bad, but I think a lot of them are there, from what I can see, for the on-trade, you know. So you go in and you're drinking a stout, and you can chase it with a whiskey that's also a stout cask whiskey, or an IPA, then you can chase it with a thing. And I can see why it would work, and it's attractive. But yeah, maybe novelty, not in the pejorative. I suppose I think of novelty like something women would carry around with them on a hen party, you know. But yeah, I suppose that there's multiple meanings to that word. And
don't forget that, well, you know, my opinion is just my opinion, you know. I love, more than anything else, I love whiskey in a bourbon cask. I really do. Smoky, unpeated, peated, blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't mean I don't love it in a red wine cask or a sherry cask, but it also doesn't mean that just because I don't necessarily like smoky whiskey in port cask, for example, which is true, doesn't mean that I'm not going to make one, because I can make one that tastes in a way where I'm like, yeah, it's definitely a quality product. Other people will absolutely go nuts and love it. You know, it's just my opinion's my opinion. I'm not Jesus, you know. close, but I'm not. No, I'm just joking. But it's just my opinion.
You've got shorter hair than Jesus, but
yeah. For now, it's just because I'm laying low at the moment. I've got sandals on, but it's just my opinion. You know, like gather opinion. There'll be another whiskey maker out there, and he or she will be saying beer's the future. Beer casks are amazing. That's the way they work with it, and it's their whiskey. Yeah, it's just no, don't follow any whiskey maker religiously. Is I think what I'm trying to say. Take their opinions. You've got your own bloody opinions. You've got your own palate, and it's your money as well. So
different strokes for different folks. You know, horses for courses. Yeah. James is asked on that kind of similar theme. James is asking, when you say experiment, are there casks and Deanston sheds where you have experimented and it's gone, that's awful, and it's left there, poured away, and never hit the shelf? Or is that the stuff you just send on to third parties now?
So you're always a bit special with the innovation. So if you're going to work with a brand new cask that you've never worked with before in your entire life, you don't even know what it tastes like, you don't even really trust the supplier, but it sounds too groovy and cool. You don't sell the farm on this one. You don't fill 8,000 casks of this with 20-year-old Deanston. You get 4 or 5 casks as a trial. You put some 3-year-old in it, some 5-year-old in it, some 10-year-old in it, and maybe a 12-year-old in it. And you monitor it and you look and you sample it often and you start to see where it's going. And there is something you go, oh wow, that's really going south and quick. So you get it out of that cask. You get your fingers burned a little, but again, that phrase I used earlier, if you never fail, you're not trying hard enough. So usually you tend to recover it, and then you put it into a really nice first fill bourbon or a virgin oak, and it will bring it back to somewhere near normality. Then you'll let it just mature out, and then you'll incorporate it into one of your whiskies in the future. But I think that's the main way. It's very, very rare that you make something that's just so absolutely hideous that you actually keep it as a collector's item. And I have done that before. We used Brazilian cherry wood in a previous employ to make a whiskey, and it was horrific, like so horrific that you have to taste it to believe how horrendous it is. It's like drinking shoe polish, but few and far between that you go that far that it's undrinkable. Just trust your suppliers, trust your skills, sample often, be ready to move if things are going south.
Adam had suggested whiskey and ketchup casks, but I think that might breach the Whiskey Association's laws on what you can mature. I had a question actually, and I suppose we're at that point where we'd love people's kind of feedback on the 4 drams. What was your favorite? And also if you've any questions for Brendan. My question, I said the controversial one till after 5 drams. Brendan, you recently had it was in the news, a switch of ownership at Distell, I heard. Will that change in your direction or anything, or?
So not yet. So we haven't actually had a switch of direction. Heineken are trying to purchase Distell, the parent company, and Heineken and Distell have been in negotiations. Well, not negotiations. They've been trying to make a purchase happen for a year. Beyond that, it's all sort of big corporate talk and financial numbers and things that, frankly, I wouldn't be qualified to give you a good answer on, and also I don't really care. What I can say is Deanston's been around since 1966, and that's the young one. Bunnahabhain since 1881, Tobermory and Leitchig since the 1700s, and whatever happens, the plan will still be we're going to make the best whiskey we can in the most sustainable way we can, an amazing core range with some really exciting and interesting innovations. That's not going to change. It's just not going to change.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's good to hear. I've also put the the discount code into the chat there, folks. For anyone who missed it, it's WS15DVT, and that will get you 50% off all the bottles we tried tonight. We had some great responses coming in. Jonathan Richmond says organic for me. Vicky has said 4, 1, 2, 3, 5. So her least favorite was the organic. That's interesting. Steph has said 1, 5, 3, 2. Pardon?
How dare you?
Roger's gone 4, 2, 5, 3, 1. James has gone 5, 2, 1, 4, 3. Ian says 5, 2, 1, 3, 4. and 14325, and then Craig. I think it's a toss up between probably the from what I can just roughly there, probably the Calvados, the 18, and the Virgin Oak, probably following close behind there from just a rough kind of count in my head. Chris has asked, Chris said, thank you for a very eloquent and entertaining tour of Deanston, and I'd like to echo that. He enjoyed the organic. You've corrected your at in there, so it's MCC_Brendan rather than MMC_Brendan. So everyone give him a follow on Instagram. So I'm just seeing if there's any questions there for a second coming in there, Brendan, but I don't think there is. Some great feedback, and we appreciate that, folks. James has said, thank you for answering all my questions, and you groupie squad with the stats and background info. Great insight into Deanston.
That's Johnny and Luke on the call here, so they're part of the sales team, and it is like, I wouldn't just say this because I've had 5 whiskies, but they are a brilliant sales team, so you'll bump into them. But yeah, I get all the credit, but it genuinely is like a big team effort. And yeah, this is why you've got Deanston on yourselves, and why you see so much Deanston, Leitchig, Tobermory, like everything. Like, if you see them about, go and say hi. They know a lot about our whiskies. We're all very passionate about it.
Luke has described them as your minders there. So that's good, because it can have
which one's Dennis Waterman, which one's Arthur?
Well, there you go, because I was going to say it could have either sinister and cool undertones, or or quite depressing ones. But the Lucas said Nick and Margaret. So yeah, there's some great feedback coming in there. But I can't see any kind of new questions. But if anyone has missed one, you can always get Brendan on the old Instagram, and or just email me at the address you got the link from, and I can pass them on to Brendan. So folks, thank you, Brendan. First of all, Brendan, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and Johnny in the chat there for organizing, and for everyone who joined. We will have we've Cardrona Distillery on next week. It's a bit of a curveball. It's a New Zealand distillery, and there is going to be their single malt vodka on there. So that might be it's something new. So it's not just about going to brands you've heard of. It's also about exploring your horizon. So do join that, and then hopefully, all going well, tomorrow afternoon we'll have Dunville's Distillery, Ecklenville, going on sale. That will be on the 1st of December. So do watch out for those two. They might be the last two before Christmas. We'll see. There's potentially one more on the 15th, but we had to do some rejigging of the schedule last minute. So if you were holding off, you can always join those two. So Brendan, thank you so much for joining us. I might see you down the distillery around Stirling someday.
See me. Everyone, if you ever come to the distillery, I'm there, not every day, but see when you're checking in, see if I'm about. I'd love to come and say hello. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks for drinking Deanston. I really appreciate it, and thank you, Luke, for hosting.
Thanks very much. No, it's been fantastic. And one more time, folks, that discount code is WS15DVT, and that'll give you 15% off those drams. Any issues, drop me an email, and we'll see you all again soon, hopefully. Cheers, Brendan.
Cheers all. Thanks, Luke. Bye.